He had learned to accept small endings quietly. A closed door, a polite nod, a child waiting at home. What he did not expect was that one ordinary dismissal would bend the direction of his life, not through revenge or triumph, but through patience, care, and an unfamiliar kind of safety. Stay for a while. Some stories unfold best when they are not hurried. The termination meeting lasted less than 8 minutes. There were no raised voices, no accusations, just a careful arrangement of words, rehearsed enough to sound kind. He sat with his hands folded, nodding at the appropriate pauses, already calculating the time it would take to reach the bus stop afterward. The child care center closed at 6. He had learned to keep his mind anchored to clocks. When it was done, he stood, thanked them for their time, and left his badge on the table where it would not be forgotten. The hallway felt longer on the way out, the glass walls suddenly reflective instead of transparent. He avoided looking at himself. He had work to do, even now. Outside, the afternoon had turned thin and gray, the kind of light that made the city look tired rather than busy. He buttoned his coat, checked his phone, and started toward the subway entrance. There was no panic yet. Panic required privacy. This was still a public space, and he knew how to hold himself together in public. He was almost at the curb when he heard the sharp sound of something hitting the pavement behind him. A phone, sliding too far, spinning once before, stopping near his foot. He bent automatically and picked it up before thinking about it, holding it out as he turned. The woman who reached him was clearly annoyed, though not at him. Her expression carried the residue of command-tight mouth, focused eyes, but something in her posture was slightly off, as if she were bracing against a pressure no one else could see. She took the phone, their fingers brushing briefly, and nodded once. "Thank you," she said. The word was efficient, not warm. He nodded back and would have continued on his way if she had not paused, her attention snagged by the child's drawing tucked into the clear sleeve of his work bag. Crayon lines, uneven but determined. A house with a crooked door. "Your child?" she asked, not unkindly. "Yes," he said. It was easier than explaining anything else. She studied the drawing for a moment longer than politeness required, then seemed to realize herself standing there, blocking the flow of pedestrians. She stepped aside, gesturing faintly for him to pass. They might have ended there, two strangers resuming separate trajectories, but the sound that followed changed the rhythm of the moment. A short, sharp cry too sudden to ignore came from a few steps away. A little girl, no more than 5, had tripped near the curb, her mittened hands scraping the concrete. Her mother was already crouching, murmuring reassurance, but the crying continued, loud and breathless. He did not think. He knelt, unzipping his bag, and pulled out a packet of tissues. He held them out silently. The mother took them with a grateful look that said more than words. The child's crying softened, then quieted into hiccups. When he stood again, the woman was still there, watching him. Not watching the child, watching him. Something in her expression had shifted, as if a window had been opened without her consent. "You work here," she said, glancing back at the building. "I did," he replied. He did not elaborate. He had learned that explanations invited questions, and questions took time. She nodded slowly, absorbing this without comment. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The city moved around them, indifferent and precise. "I'm late," she said finally, though there was no one with her. The admission sounded unfamiliar in her mouth. "So am I," he said. And for the first time that day, the truth of it pressed close to the surface. She looked at him again, more directly now. He could see the calculation begin, and then, unexpectedly, stop. Whatever she had been about to decide, she seemed to set it aside. "May I walk with you?" she asked. Not an order, a question. He hesitated only long enough to picture the clock above the daycare door. "All right," he said. They walked in silence for half a block. The quiet was not awkward, only careful. At the corner, she slowed. "I made the decision," she said, "about your job." He stopped. She did too. "I know," he said. Her eyes narrowed slightly, not in offense, but in recognition. "You don't seem angry." "I don't have time," he said. The honesty surprised him as much as it seemed to surprise her. Something like regret passed through her expression, quick and controlled. She nodded once, as if accepting a limit she could not move. "Take care of your child," she said. "I will," he replied. They parted there. He descended into the subway, the sound of the city folding over him again. The day had broken, yes, but not loudly. Just enough to let something else begin to slip through. He reached the daycare with 7 minutes to spare. The familiar smell of disinfectant and warm food greeted him as he signed his name, his hand steadier than he felt. His son was sitting on the floor near the window, lining up small wooden blocks with a concentration that made the rest of the room disappear. When he looked up and saw him, his face opened into relief rather than excitement, as if this arrival had been something he had been holding his breath for. "Did you work late?" the boy asked, already standing. "No," he said. "I'm right on time." They walked home together, the boy's hand tucked into his coat pocket, fingers warm and trusting. The apartment was small but clean, everything arranged so that nothing was wasted, not space, not effort. He set water to boil while his son changed out of his school clothes. Pasta again, with canned sauce stretched by careful additions. It was not apology food. It was simply what they had. They ate at the small table by the window. Outside, lights flickered on in other apartments, brief glimpses of other lives settling into evening. His son talked about a book they had read, about a boy who fixed broken things. He listened, nodding, asking one careful question at a time. Later, after homework and a bath, he tucked his son into bed. The child watched him with solemn eyes. "You're home more," he said. "Yes," he replied. "Is that good?" He paused, smoothing the blanket. "It can be." The boy accepted this without further inquiry, turning onto his side. Within minutes, his breathing slowed into sleep. Only then did he sit on the edge of the couch and let the day catch up to him. He took out his phone and opened the email he had already seen twice. Severance details. Polite language. A door closed neatly. He read it again anyway because reading felt like doing something. A knock came just after 8. He looked at the clock, then at the door, confused. No one knocked on his door without calling first. He opened it cautiously. She stood there with a paper bag in her hand. No coat this time, just a simple sweater, her hair pulled back. Without the building behind her, she looked different, less imposed upon by her own role. "I hope this isn't inappropriate," she said. "I realized I hadn't eaten." He considered the bag, then the quiet apartment behind him. "All right," he said finally, "but we're finished for the night." "I understand." They sat at opposite ends of the table. She unpacked the bag carefully, arranging containers as if order itself were a form of respect. Soup, bread, something that smelled of herbs and warmth. She poured 2 bowls, sliding one toward him without comment. "This isn't charity," she said quietly. "It's surplus." He nodded, accepting the framing. They ate without hurry. The soup was good, too good, but he did not comment on that either. "You live here alone?" she asked. "With my son." "Yes," she said. "I meant this life." He looked around. "This is it." She absorbed the room slowly. The worn couch. The bookshelf with children's titles mixed among manuals and paperbacks. The calendar on the wall, dates circled in blue ink. "I don't come into places like this often," she said. "Most people don't," he replied, not unkindly. They spoke a little more, mostly about neutral things. The school nearby. The grocery store on the corner. When she stood to leave, she hesitated. "I won't interfere," she said, "but I would like to help if it doesn't cost you anything." He met her gaze. "My son comes first." She nodded. "I wouldn't expect anything else." After she left, he washed the bowls and set them to dry. The apartment felt the same as it always had: quiet, contained, but something had shifted. Not improved, not worsened, just changed, like a chair moved slightly closer to the table. He turned off the lights and went to bed, listening to the steady breathing from the next room. For the first time that day, he slept without dreaming. She did not return the next day, or the day after. Whatever impulse had brought her to his door did not seem to require repetition. Life, for him, settled back into its careful shape. Mornings measured by alarm tones, lunches packed the night before, job listings scanned while his son ate cereal and talked about nothing important. He sent out applications quietly, without hope or despair attached to them. Work, he knew, would come eventually. It always did, in some form. A week passed before he saw her again. She was waiting near the school gate when he arrived for pickup, standing a few steps away from the other parents, as if unsure where she belonged. There was nothing about her clothing that suggested wealth or authority. No sharp lines, no statement pieces. She looked, if anything, deliberately plain. He slowed when he noticed her. She did not wave. She only inclined her head slightly when he reached her. "I was in the neighborhood," she said. The explanation was offered, not insisted upon. He glanced at the school entrance, where children were beginning to spill out in uneven bursts of energy. "Pickups are loud," he said. "You don't have to stay." "I want to," she replied. They waited side by side. When his son emerged, scanning the crowd until he found him, his face lit with recognition. He ran the last few steps, backpack bouncing, and took his hand without hesitation. Then he noticed her. "Hello," she said, lowering herself slightly so she was not looming. "I'm—" She stopped, then smiled faintly. "I'm a friend." The boy considered this, then nodded. "Do you like puzzles?" he asked. "Yes," she said after a beat. "Very much." That seemed to satisfy him. He resumed talking to his father about a spelling test while she listened, silent and attentive, as if these small details mattered more than any meeting she had ever attended. After that, she appeared occasionally. Never announced. Never with expectation. Sometimes she walked with them part of the way home. Sometimes she only stayed long enough to say hello. When she did come inside, she took her cues from him, where to sit, when to speak, when to simply observe. She did not bring gifts. She brought time. On Thursdays, when his son had an after-school activity, she joined him on the bench outside the community center. They watched other parents scroll through their phones or talk too loudly about things that did not concern them. "You don't ask many questions," she said once. "I don't need many answers," he replied. She accepted this without offense. In the quiet that followed, she rested her hands loosely in her lap, unguarded in a way that felt intentional. He noticed the changes gradually. The way his son began to look for her in a room without being prompted. The way she learned their routines without being told. She knew when to step back and when to lean in, when silence was a kindness rather than an absence. One evening, as they sat at the table working through a puzzle his son had insisted she help with, she laughed softly at her own mistake. The sound startled all three of them. It was not loud, just real. His son smiled at her, pleased. He watched from across the table, hands still, and understood something without naming it. She was not trying to insert herself into their lives. She was allowing herself to be shaped by them. Later, after his son had gone to bed, she stood by the door, hesitating. "I don't want to disrupt what you've built," she said. "If this becomes complicated—" "It already is," he said gently, "but not in a bad way." She looked at him then, truly looked, and for a moment the distance between them narrowed. Not through touch, through shared restraint. Outside, the hallway light flickered. Inside, the apartment held its breath. She became part of their days without ever claiming them. On mornings when she joined them for breakfast, she arrived early enough to help slice fruit, late enough not to intrude on their waking rituals. She learned that his son preferred his toast barely colored, that he liked his juice diluted with water, that he talked most freely when his hands were busy. She followed his lead, never correcting, never steering. He noticed how carefully she watched him with the child, not with judgment, but with attention. When his son grew frustrated over a homework problem and pushed his chair back too hard, she did not intervene. She waited. He knelt, spoke quietly, waited for the breathing to slow. Only then did she slide the chair back into place, as if that had always been her role. Some afternoons, she stayed while he filled out applications at the kitchen table. She did not offer connections or solutions. She read instead, or helped his son with small projects, her presence steady but light. When he finally closed his laptop, she looked up, as if sensing the shift. "You don't ask how it's going," he said once. "I know how it's going," she replied. "You're still showing up." He considered that. It felt accurate. They spoke about her work only in fragments. Long hours. Decisions that followed her home. The cost of being the last authority in a room. She did not dramatize it. He did not romanticize it. The imbalance between their worlds remained visible, but it was no longer sharp. One evening, as they walked back from the grocery store, his son skipped ahead, dragging a stick along the fence. She fell into step beside him. "I don't do this well," she said quietly. "Do what?" "Stay," she said, without managing. He watched his son stop to examine a crack in the sidewalk, then move on. "You're doing fine," he said. "You're not trying to fix anything." She nodded, as if that mattered more than reassurance. The seasons edged forward. Jackets grew heavier. The light changed. On a cold afternoon, she waited with them outside the school, her hands tucked into her sleeves. When his son emerged, he ran to her first, then corrected himself, reaching for his father's hand as well. She noticed. So did he. At home, she helped with dinner, chopping vegetables too carefully at first, then more naturally. Steam fogged the window. The radio played low. There was nothing remarkable about the evening, and that was what made it feel significant. After his son went to bed, they sat on the couch, a respectful distance between them. The room was dim, lit only by a lamp near the bookshelf. "I'm aware of what this looks like," she said, "from the outside." He did not ask her to explain. "What matters is what it is," he said. She smiled faintly. "And what is it?" He thought for a long moment. "It's quiet," he said. "And it's safe." She let out a slow breath, as if she had been holding it for weeks. She did not move closer. Neither did he. The space between them remained, not as absence but as agreement. When she left that night, she paused at the door. "Thank you," she said, "for letting me be here." He nodded. "You already are." After she was gone, he turned off the lights and stood for a moment in the darkened room. From the bedroom came the soft sound of his son shifting in sleep. Outside, traffic moved on, distant and unconcerned. Nothing in his life had been repaired or resolved, but something had been carefully, deliberately shared, and that, he realized, had changed everything. The first sign of strain came quietly, almost politely. It arrived in the form of an envelope slipped under his door one morning while his son brushed his teeth. Heavy paper, his name printed cleanly without error. Inside was an offer: consulting work, short-term, well-compensated, flexible. The kind of opportunity that did not appear by chance. He did not need to ask where it had come from. He folded the letter once and placed it back in the envelope. He did not tear it up. He did not hide it. He set it on the counter beside the fruit bowl where ordinary things lived. That evening, after his son had gone to bed, she noticed it. "You don't have to decide now," she said, reading his silence accurately. "I'm not deciding at all," he replied. She leaned against the counter, arms crossed loosely, not defensive but braced. "It's not leverage," she said. "It's work." "I know," he said. "That's why it's complicated." She nodded. This was not a conversation she could solve by being precise. "I don't want to disrupt his life," she said. "Or yours." He looked at her then. "You already have," he said gently, "but not the way you think." She waited. "My son feels safe," he continued. "That's rare. I can't risk confusing that." Her expression tightened, not in anger, but in recognition of consequence. "You think I would take that from him?" "No," he said. "I think the world around you might." The truth settled between them, heavy and undeniable. Her life was visible. His was not. Attention moved unevenly, and it always flowed toward power. The next day, a photo appeared online. Not of them together, but of her standing outside the school gate, waiting. The caption speculated without accusation. Still, it was enough. He saw it that night, sent by a neighbor who meant well. She called moments later. "I'm sorry," she said. "I didn't think." "I know," he replied. "That's not the problem." They met the following evening at the small park near his apartment. His son played on the swings while they sat on opposite ends of the bench, the distance between them no longer comfortable. "I can step back," she said, for a while. He watched his son pump his legs, gaining height, laughing softly to himself. "He'll notice," he said. She swallowed. "So will I." Silence stretched. This time it carried weight. "What would it cost you," he asked, "to stay?" She did not answer immediately. For the first time since he had known her, she seemed unsure how to measure the loss. She answered him slowly, as if each word had to be tested before it could be trusted. "It would cost me control," she said. "Not publicly. Privately." He waited. "I am used to being able to contain things," she continued. "To absorb attention, redirect it, minimize damage. This," she gestured toward the swing set, toward the small, ordinary life unfolding there, "doesn't bend that way." His son jumped from the swing and ran to the bench, breathless. "Can we go now?" he asked. "It's getting dark." "Yes," he said, standing. He held out his hand. She rose as well, stepping back instinctively, giving them space. The child waved to her without ceremony, then tugged gently at his father's sleeve, already thinking ahead to dinner. They walked home alone. That night, after his son was asleep, he sat at the table and looked again at the envelope. He imagined the stability it could bring. New shoes without calculation. Fewer late nights. A little margin. Then he imagined the questions his son would not ask but would feel. He left the envelope where it was. The next few days passed without her. No messages. No explanations. He told himself this was responsible, necessary. He told himself it would settle. It did not. His son grew quieter. Not sad, just alert, as if waiting for something that might not arrive. On the fourth day, as they walked home from school, he asked, "Is she busy?" "Yes," he said. "Oh," the boy replied. He kicked a stone along the sidewalk, careful not to let it roll into the street. That evening there was a knock at the door. She stood there without preamble, coat still on, hair loose from its usual restraint. "I resigned from 2 boards today," she said, "and I declined an acquisition I've been pursuing for years." He did not move. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because it's the truth," she said, "and because I needed to know if the cost I was afraid of was real." "And?" he asked. "It was," she said. But so was the relief. From the bedroom came a small sound, his son turning in sleep. He glanced toward the hallway, then back at her. "This doesn't solve everything," he said. "I know," she replied. "It only changes what's possible." He considered her face, the tired steadiness in it. "My son comes first," he said again. She nodded. "I'm not asking to be first." He opened the door wider. "Then come in," he said, "and sit down." She did. Not as a solution, not as a victory. Just as someone willing to stay, knowing exactly what it would cost. The changes she made did not announce themselves. There were no headlines, no public explanations. Her name continued to appear where it always had, but with less frequency, less insistence. Meetings were delegated. Appearances shortened. The edges of her life softened in ways that were visible only to those close enough to notice. He did notice. What surprised him most was not what she let go of, but what she learned to wait for. She no longer arrived with answers. She arrived with time. She sat through his son's school recital in an uncomfortable folding chair, clapping gently, eyes fixed not on the stage but on the small boy scanning the crowd for familiar faces. When his son found her gaze, he smiled, steadied. She smiled back, careful not to make it about herself. Afterward, they walked home together, under a sky already darkened by early winter. His son talked about a missed note, about a friend who had forgotten their lines. She listened as if these details mattered more than any quarterly report. At home, she stayed while he made dinner. She washed dishes without being asked, dried them the way he did, stacking them neatly, efficiently. It was not performance. It was learning. One evening, as his son worked on a drawing at the table, she spoke without looking up. "I won't offer him anything you haven't already approved," she said. "Time. Presence. Nothing else." He leaned against the counter, watching his son choose his colors with care. "He doesn't need more," he said. "I know," she replied. The real test came quietly, without ceremony. A former colleague called him with an offer of full-time work, stable, modestly paid. Not ideal, but reliable. He considered it carefully. The hours would be long, commute difficult, evenings would be thinner, stretched. He discussed it with his son in the careful way he always did, explaining only what was necessary. "Will you still come to pick up?" his son asked. "Most days," he said honestly. The boy nodded, absorbing this. Later that night, he mentioned it to her. "You should take it," she said immediately. Then she stopped herself. "If it feels right." He studied her face. There was no expectation there, no hidden relief. "It will make things harder," he said. "For you," she said. "Or for him?" "For both," he replied. She nodded slowly. "Then maybe it isn't the right cost." He declined the offer the next morning. Not out of pride, out of alignment. That afternoon, she arrived earlier than usual. She stood by the window, watching the street below. "I've been asked to relocate," she said. 6 months, possibly longer. His chest tightened. "And?" "I said no," she replied, "without asking you first." He turned to face her. "You don't have to choose your life around us." "I already did," she said softly. "The question now is whether I can do it without harm." From the hallway came the sound of his son's footsteps, light and quick. The moment held. Not resolved, but chosen. They did not discuss the relocation again that night. His son burst in with a story about a classmate and a lost glove, and the conversation adjusted itself around that small urgency. Dinner was simple. The rhythm of the evening held. Later, after his son was asleep, she stood at the window again, hands resting lightly on the sill. "I don't want him to grow up thinking people disappear when things get difficult," she said. "I know I can't promise permanence, but I can promise not to vanish." He joined her, leaving a careful space between them. "He's learned that some people leave," he said. "What he hasn't learned yet is that some people choose to stay." She turned toward him then. "And you?" she asked. "What are you choosing?" The question was not a challenge. It was an opening. "I'm choosing stability," he said, "and honesty. If you're here as you are. Not as a solution, not as protection." She nodded. "I can do that." The following week settled into a pattern that felt deliberate. She came on the same days, left at the same times. She did not overextend. When work pulled at her attention, she named it and stepped back rather than pretending it did not exist. His son adjusted easily to this consistency. Children, he knew, trusted what repeated itself. One evening, as they folded laundry together, his son held up one of her sweaters. "This is soft," he said. She smiled. "You can keep it there if you want." He nodded, folding it carefully and placing it on the shelf between his father's clothes. No one commented on the significance of this. It did not need explanation. The decision that mattered most came without discussion. A routine parent-teacher meeting ran late. The hallway emptied, lights dimmed. When he finally emerged, tired and distracted, she was there, sitting in one of the small chairs, coat draped over her arm. "I didn't want him to wait alone," she said simply. His son ran to him, relief immediate. "She stayed," he said. "Yes," he replied. He met her eyes over his son's head. Something settled between them. Not excitement, not relief, but trust. That night, after his son was asleep, he reached for her hand for the first time. Not urgently, not to claim, just to confirm. She did not tighten her grip. She did not lean closer. She held his hand as one might hold something fragile and real. They sat like that for a long time, listening to the quiet of the apartment. Outside, the city moved on, indifferent as ever. Inside, something had been chosen and would be protected. Not loudly, not publicly, but with intention. The apartment did not change much. That was the point. The couch stayed where it had always been, its cushions softened by years of careful use. The table still bore faint marks from homework and hurried dinners. His son's drawings continued to appear on the refrigerator door, held in place by mismatched magnets. Nothing was replaced, nothing upgraded. What shifted instead was how the space was used. She did not move in. She did not need to. She arrived in the morning sometimes, early enough to walk them to school. Other days, she came in the evenings, staying just long enough to help with dinner or sit quietly while his son read aloud from a book he was proud of finishing. When she left, she did so predictably, never stretching the night thin. His son adapted without comment. He no longer asked if she was coming. He simply noticed when she did. Stability, he seemed to understand, was not about presence every day, but about trust that presence would not vanish without reason. Work came for him eventually. A position at a small firm, unremarkable and steady. The hours were reasonable. The commute, manageable. On his first day, she walked with him part of the way, hands in her pockets, listening as he spoke through his nervousness without trying to soothe it. "You'll be fine," she said only once, and then let the silence do the rest. In the evenings they fell into an easy rhythm. Dinner, homework, bath, bedtime. Sometimes she stayed through all of it. Sometimes she left halfway through, pressing a light kiss to his son's hair, a gesture so natural it startled him the first time he saw it. His son accepted it without pause, already absorbed in something else. On weekends, they spent time together without planning it. A walk to the library, groceries, sitting on the floor with a half-finished puzzle while the radio played low. She learned which silences belonged to him and which belonged to the child, and she respected both. One afternoon, as they sat at the table, his son looked up from his drawing and said, "This feels like home." Neither adult corrected him. Later, after his son was asleep, they stood together in the kitchen. The window cracked open to the night air. "You built something careful here," she said. "So have you," he replied. She shook her head slightly. "I'm learning how not to build over people." He considered that, then nodded. It felt true. There was no declaration, no moment that marked an ending or beginning, just the steady continuation of days that fit together without friction. When she left that night, she paused at the door, as she always did. "I'll see you Thursday," she said. "We'll be here," he replied. After the door closed, he turned off the lights and stood for a moment in the quiet apartment. From the bedroom came the familiar sound of his son breathing, slow and even. Outside, the city hummed, distant and unconcerned. Inside, the house held. Not because it was large, not because it was permanent, but because the people within it had chosen to stay. The day ended the way most days did, without announcement. His son fell asleep halfway through a sentence, book still open against his chest. He waited a moment before gently easing it away, placing it on the nightstand with the practiced care of someone who had done this many times. The child shifted once, then settled, breath deepening into the steady rhythm that marked safety more reliably than words ever could. In the living room, the lights were low. She sat on the edge of the couch, shoes off, coat folded neatly beside her. She did not check her phone. She never did here. When he joined her, they sat without speaking, listening to the apartment breathe pipes settling, a distant siren passing without urgency. "This is my favorite part of the day," she said quietly. He nodded. "Mine too." They did not lean into each other. They did not need to. The closeness existed without contact, shaped by familiarity rather than desire. Outside, the city continued its restless movement, but inside the walls held firm, unchanged. After a while, she stood and slipped her coat back on. "Thursday," she said, as she always did. "Yes," he replied. At the door, she hesitated, not uncertain, just attentive. She looked back once, taking in the room as if committing it to memory. The lamp by the bookshelf, the faint outline of a drawing taped crookedly to the wall, the quiet man standing in a space he had earned. She left without ceremony. He locked the door and moved through the apartment, turning off lights one by one. In the kitchen, he paused, noticing the sweater his son had folded earlier resting on the shelf between his own clothes. He did not move it. In the bedroom, he lay awake for a few minutes listening. The building settled. Somewhere below, a door closed. Somewhere above, someone laughed softly. Ordinary sounds layered together into something almost comforting. He thought briefly of the day he had lost his job. The clean words. The closed door. the certainty that had followed him home like a shadow. He did not linger on it. That version of himself felt distant, now not erased, just no longer alone. Tomorrow would come as it always did. Breakfast, school, work, evening. The quiet return. Nothing in his life was extravagant. Nothing was dramatic. But when he closed his eyes, the sense that remained was simple and complete. They were safe. They were home. And after the lights were off, that was enough.